Hello everyone. We are starting a new series based on the Book of Proverbs. I have titled the series as Studies in the Book of Proverbs. Now, the Book of Proverbs in the Bible is known as the Book of Wisdom, and it is written mostly by the wisest man ever to live on the earth, King Solomon. Now, in this book, there are several topics that are discussed, and in this video, we are going to talk about proud people and humble people. Now, when we are discussing this topic, we are going to contrast pride with humility. We are going to be contrasting between proud people and humble people, the characteristics of the proud people and the characteristics of the humble people. And we are going to talk about the consequences and curses of pride and the blessings of humility. We're going to divide this video into three sections. In section 1, we're going to talk about God and the proud. What is the relationship between God and the proud people? Section 2, we are going to talk about the characteristics of the proud people. And in section 3, we are going to talk about the consequences of pride or the curses of pride. Let's begin with section 1, where we are going to talk about God and the proud people. Now, before we look into specific verses, let me define pride and humility a little bit for us. Pride is basically a false view of oneself and others. Pride has an inflated view of oneself and a deflated view of others. In other words, a proud person thinks too highly of himself and he thinks too lowly of others. Now, pride is deceptive and it clouds one's perspective. Pride is the worship of the self. Knowingly or unknowingly, a proud person makes himself God, and therefore pride is self-idolatry. In contrast to all of that, humility is the right kind of perspective about oneself and others. Now, a humble person recognizes that God is God and not oneself. A humble person does not have a lowly view of others or a lowly view of oneself. A humble person has God's perspective about himself and others. A humble person is ready to put others before oneself. A humble person fears the Lord, while a proud person does not fear the Lord. Now let's look at a few passages from the book of Proverbs that speak about God's relationship with the proud people. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 34 reads like this: "He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed." The he is referring to God, and God mocks proud mockers. Now, one thing that I want us to pay attention to is that proud people are mockers. The reason why they mock other people is because they have a high view of oneself and a low view of others, and therefore they mock other people, they despise other people, but God mocks such kind of proud mockers. On the other hand, God shows his favor to the humble and to the oppressed. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 and verse 17. "There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes," which means prideful eyes, "a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community." So the wise man is providing us with a list of things that Lord hates, and he considers them detestable. And one of those things is having proud eyes, haughty eyes. Chapter 8, verse 13, we read like this: "To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior and perverse speech. Who is talking here? This is wisdom talking. Wisdom is acting as if wisdom is a person, and wisdom says, I hate pride and arrogance. Now, the word arrogance is defined in the Merriam-Webster dictionary as an attitude of superiority manifested in an overbearing manner or in presumptuous claims or assumptions. So when you have a person who is proud, arrogance flows out of him. Evil behavior flows out of that person, and perverse speech flow out of that person. And wisdom says that I hate pride and everything that comes out of a proud person. Chapter 15, verse 25, the Bible tells us, the Lord tears down the house of the proud, but he sets the widow's boundary stones in place. So what does the Lord do to the proud person's house? The Bible tells us that the Lord will destroy. The Lord would tear down the house of the proud, but at the same time, he would take care of the widow's boundaries as well. Chapter 16, verse 5. The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. So the Lord does not like, the Lord detests everyone who is proud in his heart. So with that, I close section 1, but I want us to see what God says about pride. First of all, God mocks proud mockers. Number 2, God hates pride. God considers pride detestable to him. In verse 13 of chapter 8, we read that God hates pride and arrogance. The Lord tears down the house of the proud. The Lord detests all that are proud of heart. And so the prideful people, the proud people, always find themselves on the wrong side of God. They are not on the side of God. They are on the opposite side of God. In contrast to the humble person who receives favor from the Lord and is pleasant to the Lord and is acceptable to the Lord, and so on. We move to section 2, where we are going to discuss the characteristics of the proud. Chapter 8, verse 13, we have already read it. It says, to fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior and perverse speech. So what are the characteristics of a proud person? There is arrogance, that attitude of superiority and overbearing claims, presumptuous assumptions, claims, etc. Evil behavior flow from pride. Perverse speech flow from pride. Chapter 14, verse 3, a fool's mouth lashes out with pride, but the lips of the wise protect them. So here is a contrast between the fool and the wise. The fool is full of pride, while the wise does not have that pride in him. Another thing that the book of Proverbs points out is that just like God and pride are on opposite sides of each other, wisdom and pride are on the opposite sides of each other. A person who is proud is never a wise person. Now, a fool's mouth lashes out with pride, but the lips of the wise protect them. In other words, a proud person speaks things that will endanger himself, whereas the words coming out of the wise man's mouth will protect him. Chapter 16, verse 19. Better to be lowly in spirit along with the oppressed than to share plunder with the proud. You know, the wise man is saying that humble people have better friendships. It's easier to make friends with humble people. They are better friends. Proud people are horrible to be around. Obnoxious behavior comes from them, and it is so horrible that it is better to be the friend of a poor person than to be the friend of a proud person, even if there is monetary benefit attached to it. See, the characteristics of a proud person is that he speaks in a way that endangers himself. There is evil behavior flowing out of himself. They do not have good friendships. Chapter 21, verse 24. The proud and arrogant person, mocker is his name, behaves with insolent fury. So a proud person is a mocking person. He is a mocker. He despises other people because he looks down upon other people, and he behaves with uncontrollable anger, uncontrollable fury. Chapter 30, verses 11 to 14. There are those who curse their fathers and do not bless their mothers, those who are pure in their own eyes and yet are not cleansed of their filth, those whose eyes are ever so haughty or proud, whose glances are so disdainful, those whose teeth are swords, whose jaws are set with knives to devour the poor from the earth and the needy from among mankind. So we are talking about people whose eyes are full of pride. Their glances are so disdainful. That means they look down upon others. When you look into their eyes, you know that there is pride inside them. These are people who are pure in their own eyes. That's what they think about themselves. Yet they are not cleansed of their filth. In other words, there is dirt on the inside, but they don't know about it. Their eyes are haughty. Their teeth and their jaws are like swords and knives. And what they do is they devour the poor from the earth and the needy from among mankind. With their words, with their tongue, with their approach, they kill people, they destroy the poor and needy people, is what we are told. And with that, we come to section 3, where we are going to talk about the curses of pride, or the consequences of pride. Chapter 11, verse 2 says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. In other words, if pride is leading you, disgrace is bound to follow you. But if humility is leading you, wisdom is bound to follow. In other words, disgrace follows pride and wisdom follows humility. Chapter 13, verse 10, where there is strife, there is pride, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. In other words, if pride is leading you, strife and conflict are bound to come, because a proud person always thinks, who is the other person to tell me that I am wrong? And the proud person always wants his will to be done, and therefore there is bound to be strife and conflict. That's a consequence of pride. That is one of the curses of pride. But wisdom is found in those who take advice. Wise people take advice from other people, but the proud person cannot take advice from other persons. They are not teachable. Chapter 16, verse 18, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. So when pride leads, destruction follows. Destruction is closely following pride, such that a prideful person, a proud person always meets destruction at some point. A haughty spirit always will fall. Chapter 29, verse 23, pride brings a person low, but the lowly in spirit gain honor. In other words, when pride leads, humiliation follows. Humiliation is closely following pride. But the lowly in spirit, in other words, the humble people, they gain honor. Chapter 21, verse 4, haughty eyes and a proud heart, the unplowed field of the wicked, produce sin. I think we must spend some time discussing this verse. God says that the proud heart is the unplowed field of the wicked. You know, our hearts are compared to fields in the Bible. In the parable of the sower, you find a person who goes out to sow seeds, and some of those seeds fall on hard ground, some of those seeds fall on rocky ground, some of them fall among the thorns, and some of them fall on good ground. Now you read in the parable that when the seeds fall on hard ground, the birds quickly come and take those seeds away. When the seeds fall on the rocky ground, they do grow, but since there is not enough soil, they go away. And the seeds that fall among the thorny ground, they do grow, but the thorns, the deceitfulness of wealth and the worries of this world choke the life out of the plant. But the seeds that fall on good ground bear good fruit. And Jesus is comparing the different kinds of human hearts and their responses to the word of God that is preached to them. So our hearts are compared to fields. Now, this verse tells us that a proud heart is the unplowed field of the wicked. In other words, the wicked person's heart, the proud person's heart has never been plowed, and therefore their hearts are full of thorns and weeds and tares and rocks and poisonous plants, etc., etc. Imagine a field that has never been plowed. That's the kind of field that a proud person has as his heart, the wicked person has as his heart. As a believer, as a child of God, our hearts are to be regularly plowed by the word of God. Our hearts are to be plowed by the Spirit of God. Our hearts are to be plowed by prayer and worship. Our hearts are plowed through godly counsel and fellowship. Our hearts are to be plowed in the presence of God. Now, sometimes God uses circumstances to plow our hearts. I want to tell you the story of the prodigal son who, in the early stages of his life, was full of pride and therefore had a high view of himself and a low view of everyone else, including his father. And therefore he thought that his father was a harsh person who did not want him to enjoy his life, had imposed a lot of rules and regulations around his life, and therefore the prodigal son, who was a proud person, thought that it is best for me to go away from my father, and therefore asks for his share of the wealth. He wants freedom. He wants to live life according to his own rules, and therefore he goes out. And then he has friends for a while when he has money, but soon the money runs out. And then he is now seeking jobs to fill his stomach. Nobody is ready to give him a job. But finally, he has a job with pigs. But the master is not ready to pay him well. And therefore, he has to fight with the pigs in order to fill his stomach. And that's the time when he comes to his senses, Luke chapter 15 tells us. In other words, God has used the circumstances of his life to plow his heart. And then he begins to think to himself, my father is not a bad man like I assumed he was. In fact, my father is a good person. In fact, he pays his servants well. His servants eat well at my father's house, and they have enough even to spare. And look at me. I am struggling in life. And therefore, he begins to have the correct kind of understanding about his father, his goodness, his love, his grace, his mercy, and so on. And so he tells himself, I will humble myself. I will go to my father and I will tell him, Father, I have sinned against you and I have sinned against heaven. Please, will you be willing to accept me as a servant into your house? Look at the pride that has been removed by the circumstances of his life. Now, wise is the person who does not have to allow the circumstances of his life to plow his heart. Wise is the person who allows the word of God and the Spirit of God to plow his heart and to develop humility inside a person. So, a proud heart, the unplowed field of the wicked, what does it produce? The Bible tells us in 21 verse 4 that it produces sin. So the unplowed field of the wicked, the proud heart, produces sin. Chapter 18 verse 12. Before a downfall, the heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor. In other words, when you have a haughty heart, when you have a proud heart, there is downfall that is written into it. But when you have humility, there is honor attached to it. Chapter 22 verse 4. Humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. You see, a humble person fears the Lord. And what are the wages of humility? In Romans, we have a chapter and verse where Paul says that the wages of sin is death. But in the book of Proverbs, we are told that the wages of humility are riches and honor and life. So if you want riches, if you want honor, if you want life, pursue humility. Pride is not the road to lead you to riches and honor and life. And therefore, pride is followed by disgrace, strife, destruction, fall, humiliation, sin, etc. But humility is followed by wisdom, honor, riches, and life. In other words, the book of wisdom instructs us that God is always opposed to the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. That's quoted in the New Testament as well. We discussed the characteristics of the proud. We also discussed the curses of pride. And we also discussed what humility does and the benefits of humility. And therefore, the book of wisdom is instructing us that we are not to be filled with pride. We are to be filled with humility. And humility comes along with the fear of God, and it brings wisdom along with it. It brings riches and honor and life along with it. The book of wisdom is advising us to be humble in our lives. Thank you.